West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
Major legal news today as Trump White House veteran Steve Bannon formally surrendered to the feds for his indictment on 2 crimes. Bannon exiting a black SUV today to face a hearing that begins what will be this prosecution for 2 counts of contempt over his defiance of Congress. This was quite a scene you see here for the one-time Trump campaign chair and right-wing gadfly. Reporters mobbing Bannon. He was headed into an FBI field office. He also streamed what you see here as part of the arrival himself. He shared it on his own video service. He was rocking his signature look of deliberately disheveled as he entered the building there. He faces an outcome that he essentially sought by blatantly defying legal subpoenas and congressional requests. Now, Bannon has come to embody the MAGA movement in this post-Trump administration era. Once pardoned by that president, this time he's on his own. And he's gone farther in his defiance than even Trump's lawyers suggested. I'll explain that in a moment. But first, consider that whatever Bannon hoped the public might see, and think of this, today is far more than some spectacle. This is a legal shift. There were a lot of debates about law and cooperation back in the Trump era. Congress found that Donald Trump obstructed, and Congress impeached him for it. But he was not, under the Constitution, convicted for that. This right now is different. January 6th has clearly become a national flashpoint, and today's legal process is not the political part. The bad news for Bannon is this is the criminal part, with the Justice Department finding that Bannon committed a new crime while covering up whatever went down on January 6th. The DOJ will do everything in its power to now convict and jail him for it. In court, Bannon is presumed innocent and has a right to a fair trial. Out of court, as he live-streamed his own perp walk into that building, he tried to divert attention from that somber process and create a kind of a pep rally, claiming an assortment of supporters while decrying the noise he himself was amplifying.
Everybody watching in the war room, we're here today. I don't want anybody to take their eye off the ball of what we do every day. Okay, we got the Hispanics coming on our side, African Americans coming on our side. We're taking down the Biden regime. Every day, the focus, you got Raheem Kassam today, you got Dr. Peter Navarro, Captain Bannon. You're going to have Boris Epstein, the whole show. Intense. We got polling out, economic data out, everything. I want you guys to stay focused, stay on message. Remember, signal, not noise. This is all noise, that's signal. Thank you very much.
Are you optimistic today? How are you feeling today, Mr. Bannon?
That is the Bannon of it all. He's claiming to take down an administration while walking into court because he has no other choice. You see there the fusion of bravado and broadcasting that blurs any sense of which part of this is real and which part is another piece of show. Now, that is deliberate. That's why he and Donald Trump vibed so much on the campaign trail. But that's not the end of the story tonight. We give you all the facts. We will show his perspective like we would in any trial, but look inside the courtroom. These are the new sketches where Bannon sat quietly with his lawyers. He was there, captured in his trademark double-popped collar and a brown jacket. He took, reportedly, some notes, as if this were a serious process, not the noise that he claimed it to be outside. He was subjected to the standard swearing in before the federal judge. And the other difference that hangs over Bannon is this time, he will be judged through a system that is not overseen by the president he helped elect. And Bannon's not just another MAGA figure in a long line of loud people. He chaired the general election campaign that Trump won. He is the guy who landed the plane, who won the Electoral College, who got the promotion to chief strategist in the White House, where he pushed policy, leading his specific list of goals that were put up on his famous whiteboard, which could be seen in those photos there when he would meet with people, immigration crackdowns, repealing Obamacare. The board behind him was his public promise to perpetual fights.
The third, broadly, line of work is what is deconstruction of the administrative state. And if you think they're going to give you your country back without a fight, you are sadly mistaken. Every day it is going to be a fight.
It's always a fight with him. But this matters beyond the character. There are some who try to reduce Steve Bannon to a character or a caricature. And that actually weirdly feeds partly into his own narrative. But the history is more complicated. It speaks to this clash tonight and why it matters. Bannon has always looked for these fights. It is not merely a public act. It actually informs his approach to campaigning and governing and leading his claimed movement, which, if you haven't noticed, even though they lost the last election, is a part of our national life. It is a view that there must always be powerful enemies to fight, that the system itself is broken. It cannot be reformed. It must be, as he just said, deconstructed. It's why Bannon spent his first weeks in power, and thus Trump's first weeks in power, leading charges that often failed as a matter of governance, like a travel ban that was ultimately pared back. At that time, in 2017, Bannon was a smart guy, deliberately leading the government into basically breaking the law. A travel ban that he rammed through, rushed and unchecked, was then struck down by the courts. Well, now Bannon continues this type of project. He lives his own life with a spurt of bravado and risk-taking. I actually pressed him about this in our Beat interview back in 2018, bearing down on the questions about his funding. He was cagey while claiming that raising it was no problem.
How much money does your group have?
We've raised, quite a bit of money. We
Over
do messaging.
$5 million?
Over $5 million, yes.
Over $10 million?
I don't want to put a specific a number on it.
Is there anyone you would not take money from?
Well, I would not take money from foreigners, right? And there's certain people, I'm pretty selective about, who I take money from. I've always had good partners, always had partners that have been pretty happy, so I'm pretty selective about who I take money from, but I've never had a problem raising money.
Never had a problem raising money, maybe not, but he did have a problem raising it legally. That's according to prosecutors who indicted Bannon for literally ripping off his own MAGA supporters and Trump fans to take their money. I don't know whether that makes him selective or not, as he claimed in our interview, but those led to charges that he was defrauding hundreds of thousands of donors, promising them he would take their money to build the wall. Now, those are charges that he evaded with a pardon from Trump. And that came after the earlier falling out with Trump, which all began, as so many of these things do in MAGA land, not with reality, but with perception and media, a falling out after Time magazine dubbed Bannon the Great Manipulator.
Bannon gets bounced.
West Wing lightning rod Steve Bannon is out tonight as President Trump's chief strategist.
Steve Bannon is out. He walked out of the West Wing and right into the Breitbart newsroom, declaring he feels jacked up and free and says his hands are back on his weapons.
Hands back on his weapons. Again, that's, in his case at the time, was a reference to the media weapons, and he went on to argue that he was basically still the self-anointed leader of this MAGA movement.
What's your current relationship with President Trump?
You can see it every day on TV. I mean, it's exactly what people report. President Trump's doing his thing, I'm doing my thing. Remember, I didn't really know President Trump that well before I stepped in and took in as CEO of the campaign.
But he said a lot about you when you had a public pardoning. Do you think he still believes those things about you?
I don't know, and I don't care.
He claimed not to care, but he certainly cared about getting the ultimate exercise of power from President Trump. a pardon over a case that they ought to care about, which was whether or not Trump fans were being defrauded. Legally, a pardon is in its acceptance and admission of guilt. This time, there's no pardon on the horizon from a president who ejected Trump from the White House. And that goes now to the legal part. I've just given you a lot of context, but it's very important to understand exactly why Bannon is in this criminal hot water right now. You may have seen headlines that he's doing Trump's bidding, but let's look at this actual new indictment, which shows that Trump was only, quote, requesting Bannon not disclose privileged information, while Bannon's lawyer then said that Bannon would not be producing documents or testifying at all. So let me explain what that means in plain English. Even Steve Bannon's lawyers admit they are doing more defiance than Donald Trump is asking for right now. That is a terrible legal strategy because, and Adam Schiff and others have talked about this, where there might be some debatable thing like a privilege issue or a scope issue of how much is Congress really asking for, lawyers meet and talk about that. It can take a long time. You don't get indicted in the middle of that negotiation. But Bannon, right now, went further than Trump and just said he won't cooperate at all, which is what the DOJ says is now the crime. Add to that Bannon's role at the so-called command center for what would be an insurrection, where he pledged all hell would break loose just hours before the riot. Now, after today's court appearance, Bannon was back on brand.
This is going to be the misdemeanor from hell for Merrick Garland, Nancy Pelosi, and Joe Biden. Joe Biden ordered Merrick Garland to prosecute me from the White House lawn when he got off Marine One. And we're going to go on the offense. We're tired of playing defense. We're going to go on the offense on this.
Fact check. No evidence has been offered for that. Now, by the way, if there was hard evidence of some sort of meddling at the DOJ, well, that would help Bannon at a trial, and we would certainly report it. But this is that slippery push and pull. Someone who has gotten accustomed to playing this game when he had an incumbent president at his back. Here he is threatening, it would seem to me, the Attorney General, talking about misdemeanors, talking about the idea that he doesn't just want his hands back on his weapons. He thinks somehow he can use the public pressure to distort the legal process and maybe get his hands back on political power on the federal government in America.
It is Tuesday, the 16th of November of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. And you know that a small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. Try it. You'll see. Well, the Rittenhouse jury will be going into deliberations, I believe, today. And I gotta say, the kid's getting off. He's pretty much already gotten off, the gun charge being dropped. And that was only a misdemeanor? What? I still don't know what's going on with the parents. I mean, this is an underage kid that they drove around. Well, the dad didn't really have much to do with it. It was the mom. Okay? And I gotta say, well, I won't say it, but they separated and divorced a bit of time ago. 2015, Dad was living there not too far from Antioch, Illinois, where Rittenhouse lives. And then he drove to Kenosha because his dad lives nearby or something. Regardless, there must have been a reason they separated. I just don't know what it is. Anyway, does the mom, maybe even the dad is culpable, I don't know. But the mom drove the kid there, drove the kid to essentially a riot. I mean, I still want to call it a demonstration. Unfortunately, there was some vandalism, and we saw, and the guy's already been charged for being an agent provocateur, Proud Boy type, with cop affiliations, starting that fire at that auto store. The guy with the umbrella. And protesters were going up there, actual Black Lives Matter, I don't want to call them officials, but, of standing in the organization, ran up to the guy and said, "What the hell are you doing?" And the guy just kind of blew him off. And I got to tell you, everybody talks about the body posture and the body language, and it sure looked like somebody was a cop. Turned out pretty much that. And then it makes you wonder, I know maybe I'm conflating it all, but it does make you wonder, because we, back in the day during the anti-war demonstrations, saw right in front of our faces agent provocateurs riling shit up. Jeez, hell, they infiltrated groups right and left. High school groups. Tried to plant guns. But some people were so, guns, what's that all about? Turned them in. I love that. Turned the cops into the cops that were trying to get the kids planted with guns. Well, I see the similar type of thing happening, and I saw it in the summer of our discontent. City's on fire, They show a TV image of a literal dumpster fire next to a courthouse, and that is called, "Our cities are on fire, and we have to call in the military." And the military said, "Shut the F up." Jesus, when you got to count on the military as being the stalwarts upholding the rule of law, which you would expect in a certain extent, but representative democracy itself? Wow. Yes. I guess our generals are traitors to fascism, aren't they? Hopefully enough of them. Because that's been pretty much infiltrated, too, by, the other side. All right. Cops, military infiltrated with Nazis. There's no other way getting around it. And we don't have to hold up a sheet of paper, blank paper, and saying, "I've got a list here." No, we can have an actual list. All right. So the kid's getting off. The gun is considered not a dangerous weapon because it wasn't apparently the length. The law was written in some sort of ambiguous way. So the gun wasn't really a danger, is what that ruling means. And yet, I keep thinking of Tamir Rice, 12 years old, playing cops and robbers with a toy cap gun in a park, alone, in the snow, gunned down. And why? Because the court ruled the cops thought that was a dangerous weapon, and that was enough. And that his and their lives were in danger. So they had to kill the kid before they even said, "Stick him up." Kyle Rittenhouse gets water bottles thrown to him from cops driving by in MRADs. I keep hearing, they had to go, all these people had to go there to protect the community. The community was awash with military gear. Give me an effing break. Tanks, MRADs, cops from every jurisdiction, all in their Mutant Ninja Turtle gear. Won't need a bunch of vigilantes around. And yet the vigilantes, I guess, were deputized, apparently, unofficially. Here, have some water. You're part of us now. Put on a badge. Kid gets coddled, gets protected, raises $500,000, drinks underage in a bar. I know. I guess apparently in Wisconsin you can drink underage in a bar as long as your mom's there. What the F? I can't imagine my mom saying, "Come on, son, let's go into a bar and have a beer." Would have never happened. And my mom was a bartender. She owned bars. Give me a break. I know you're not supposed to judge and compare others' experiences with your own. Everybody's ability to deal with stress is their own. Well, you know what? That kid should have never had a gun because he couldn't deal with the stress, could he? And when the prosecution said that Kyle Rittenhouse was the instigator in all this, he was, because the reason that the crowd responded the way they did, the reason that Rosenbaum responded the way he did, and everybody said, oh, he was just some crazy guy who couldn't learn to shut up, is because Rittenhouse was threatening a homeless guy with death. And I think actually shot at him and missed. And then everybody started yelling active shooter. And what do you do with an active shooter? Some people run. Some people want to take down the active shooter, don't they? Because that's what we're taught to do in America. You too can be a hero. But the kid gets to say that because he was a kid, he was too scared. And he had to kill these people because they were yelling at him. And Rosenbaum threw a plastic bag full of clothes that he just had given to him because he'd just been released from the hospital. That was his weapon. He gets plugged by an AR-15, and that liquefies you inside pretty quick. And then the other two came on. The one that got his arm blown off. And then the one with the skateboard. Yeah, well, you know, a skateboard against an AR-15, give me a break. And just because a Nazi in a similar situation, if they knocked over somebody and picked up their gun and they would have turned it on them, they think that everybody else would too. The crowd said that was an active shooter. They wanted to get the gun away from the active shooter, not shoot the shooter with the gun. Give me a break. We are not Nazis. We do not do that. And yet, they judge everyone and everything by their own actions. Their vile, illegal, immoral, inhumane actions. It's about time we woke up. We're supposed to sit down to Thanksgiving dinner with that? Give me a break. No more Christmas truces. I do not want a Christmas truce again with the Nazis. Singing Old Lang Syne and O Tannenbaum. Merry Savage Christmas, mofo. All right. Now that I got that off my chest, what's on the curated part of the show? Yeah, what? Well, the MAGA crime spree continued as the Bannon Circus live streamed itself, finally showing up in court. Well, they didn't live stream themselves in court, but the circus outside. And I want to know what the hell that was all about. The guy shows up because he violated the points of a subpoena. And then they let him go back out and continue threatening America? Threatening actual individuals who are running the show right now. Threatening Merrick Garland. Threatening the President of the United States. And then that little resistance-coded language. I love that. Yeah, this is not the thing, but this is the signal. Yeah, it sounds like one of those attempts at a BBC code to tell the resistance to finally do what they're supposed to do. Yeah, I know we're not supposed to ascribe magical powers to Bannon. But I will say, millions have been brainwashed, not by Bannon. But Bannon knows what to do with the brainwashed now, doesn't he? Yes, he does. What's on the rest of the menu? The EPA will not rewrite airplane emission rules that were finalized under Trump. Actually, Biden's going to take that on the international stage and get international emission rules. Good for him. Amazon settled a lawsuit by California that the company failed to notify workers of COVID cases. Yeah, go ahead, go to work, no one's sick. And they were. And a Russian's weapon test has threatened the crew of astronauts and cosmonauts on the International Space Station. You know what's funny is a lot of the reportage talked about the threat to other satellites out there before they ever talked about the humans involved. Well, that's how we work now, don't we? Yes, we do. After the break, we move to the chef's table where the NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg is wary of Russian military moves near the Ukraine. And Poland arrested 3 far-right extremists in connection to an anti-Semitic demonstration in the town of Kalisz. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is our chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of that chat room link, across the page to the left, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, your help really helps us pay our bills, and they keep increasing. How do they do it? Well, they do it, and we pay it, because that way we can fly under the radar and continue this resistance against the hostile takeover of the United States of America. If you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink, for instance, and if you could afford to send those funds our way once a month, wow, I got to tell you how much that helps, because it does. And if you could afford to send a little bit more, that would be nice too. But all kidding aside, the bills do keep increasing, let alone just the maintenance on the machinery and software and all of that. Well, thank you for your generosity over these many years, and we're going to thank you for your future generosity in the future. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and we thank Tom for doing so. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam, and I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime. Get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms. You know who they are. And you can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Okay, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by David Shepardson out of Reuters. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency said yesterday, Monday, it will not rewrite the first ever standards regulating greenhouse gas emissions from airplanes that were finalized in the last days of former President Donald Trump's administration. President Joe Biden had directed the EPA in January to consider whether to rewrite the airplane emissions rules, which face a legal challenge from 12 states and 3 environmental groups that say the rules do not go far enough. Instead, the Biden administration said it will press for ambitious new international emission standards at the upcoming round of international negotiations in February at the UN International Civil Aviation Organization. Joe Goffman, the acting head of the EPA Air and Radiation Office, told Reuters in an interview yesterday, Monday, that it was important to work with the international community and to move quickly on the next round of emissions talks. We could have really achieved a Pyrrhic victory by tightening the rule, and then finding the aviation industry avoided complying by certifying their engines via other governments, Goffman said. Liz Jones, an attorney at the Center for Biological Diversity, one of the groups that sued, said the Biden administration has taken climate hypocrisy and delay to new heights. The EPA twiddled its thumbs for 9 months before deciding it would rather defend a do-nothing rule than set any meaningful limits on aircraft emissions. Now, I understand this 2 points of view here. One is that we, as the United States, lead. We don't follow. So setting these tighter emission standards would have been showing the world that we mean business. And then we go out and we mean business by ensuring that an international emissions treaty is enacted so that these scofflaws don't take their engines overseas to have them certified somewhere else. Oh, look, I got it certified here in a place that doesn't do any manufacturing. Isn't that fun? The state said in February the regulation's greenhouse gas emission standards, the EPA's own analysis, or by the EPA's own analysis, will fail to reduce the emissions of any aircraft and will prompt no action at all by manufacturers to reduce aircraft emissions. They argue the EPA should have considered that minority and low-income communities are disproportionately located near airports and exposed to greater criteria and hazardous air pollutants from takeoff and landing emissions, which more stringent greenhouse gas emission standards could have reduced. Now, the new rules apply to new type designs as of January 2020 and to in-production airplanes of those with amended type certificates starting in 2028. Goffman said rewriting the rule would have been disruptive for our industry. It would have been disruptive for the international process, and in the three-dimensional world, not gained us anything. Three-dimensional world. Well, you know what? We still should be leading and not following in this. The ICAO emission standards effort began under former President Barack Obama's administration and was finalized under Trump in January. Boeing argued the EPA should not rewrite the rules, saying attempts to overturn regulation directly aligned with successful corporative international efforts to combat climate change, supported by more than 190 countries, will only discourage future international agreements. I don't know. There's a new sheriff in town. Last week, the U.S. set a goal of achieving net zero greenhouse gas emissions from the U.S. aviation sector by 2050. Gee, I'll only be 95 then. The White House said in September it was targeting 20% lower aviation emissions by 2030, as airlines facing pressure from environmental groups to lower their carbon footprint pledged to use more sustainable aviation fuel. Thompson of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Amazon has agreed to pay $500,000. Wow, that'll put a dent in their pocketbook. And be monitored by California officials, which is priceless, to ensure it properly notifies its workers about new coronavirus cases, the state's attorney general said yesterday, Monday. Amazon employs about 150,000 people in California, most of them at 100 fulfillment centers, sprawling warehouses where orders are packed and shipped. The agreement, which must be approved by a judge, requires the Seattle-based retailer to notify his workers within a day of new coronavirus cases in their workplaces. Amazon also agreed to notify local health agencies of new virus cases within 48 hours and will stop issuing notices that Attorney General Rob Bonta said do not adequately tell employees about Amazon's safety and disinfection plan and workers' rights related to the pandemic. As the company enjoyed booming and historic sales with its stock price doubling, Amazon failed to adequately notify warehouse workers and local health agencies of COVID-19 case numbers, often leaving them unable to effectively track the spread of the virus, Bonta told reporters in San Francisco. And that's the whole point. If you're hiding it, we're not going to be able to get rid of it. Bonta added that this left many workers understandably terrified and powerless to make informed decisions to protect themselves and to protect their loved ones, like getting tested for the virus, staying home, or quarantining if they've been notified of a potential workplace exposure. Amazon spokesperson Barbara Agrate said in a statement that the company was, quote, glad to have resolved and to see that the AG found no substantive issues with the safety measures in our buildings. Former California Attorney General Xavier Becerra, who now heads the U.S. Health and Human Service Department, last December asked a judge to order Amazon to comply with the subpoena that his office issued nearly 4 months earlier as part of its investigation into how the company was protecting workers from the coronavirus at its facilities. The state attorney general's office first disclosed the investigation in a filing in July of 2020 in a San Francisco Superior Court, in which an employee accused the company of not doing enough to safeguard staff. Marcia Dunn of the AP brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A Russian weapons test created more than 1,500 pieces of space junk that are now threatening the 7 astronauts aboard the International Space Station, according to U.S. officials who called the strike reckless and irresponsible. The State Department confirmed yesterday, Monday, that the debris was from an old Russian satellite destroyed by the missile. Needless to say, I'm outraged. This is unconscionable. NASA Administrator Bill Nelson told the AP, it's unbelievable that the Russian government would do this test and threaten not only international astronauts, but their own cosmonauts that are on board the station, as well as the 3 people on China's space station. Nelson said the astronauts now face 4 times greater risk than normal, and that's based on debris big enough to track, with hundreds of thousands of smaller pieces going undetected, any of which can do enormous damage if it hits in the right place. In condemning Russia, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said satellites were also now in jeopardy. The test clearly demonstrates that Russia, despite its claims of opposing the weaponization of outer space, is willing to imperil the exploration and use of outer space by all nations through its reckless and irresponsible behavior, Blinken said in a statement. There was no immediate comment from Russia about the missile strike. Once the threat became clear early yesterday morning, Monday, the 4 Americans, 1 German and 2 Russians on board, were ordered to immediately seek shelter in their dock capsules. They spent 2 hours in the 2 capsules, finally emerging only to have to close and reopen hatches to the station's individual labs on every orbit, or 1.5 hours, as they passed through or near the debris. By the end of the day, only the hatches to the central core of the station remained open as the crew slept. Even a fleck of paint can do major damage when orbiting at 17,500 miles per hour. Something big on impact could be catastrophic. State Department spokesman Ned Price said the U.S. has repeatedly raised concerns with Russia about doing a satellite test. We are going to continue to make clear that we won't tolerate this kind of activity, he told reporters. NASA Mission Control said the heightened threat could continue to interrupt the astronauts' science research and other work. 4 of the 7 crew members arrived at the orbiting outpost just on Thursday night. Well, that brings us to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, Eternal Questions. Warning, slight spoilers. Okay, here's a writing exercise for you. 7,000 years ago, celestial beings sent 10 powerful immortals to Earth to do 2 things: to kill an infestation of alien monsters and to jumpstart human civilization. After 3,000 or 4,000 years, the immortals complete their mission and are ordered to stay on planet without interfering with the developments they've set into motion. So they settle in for a few more thousand years until it's today, and the monsters reappear and must be defeated again, now. Do you A, start in the present day with your super people quietly living among us and give us the preceding 7,000 years in flashbacks, or do you B, start 7,000 years ago and tell your story linearly? The downside of A is it's hard for us, the audience, to care about where these characters are in their lives and relationships until we get all their history. The upside is when we're finally caught up and it's time for the immortals to defend the Earth, we believe in their emotional investment because we started with them established in today's world. B sees the reverse. The upside is you live that history with the characters and bond with them, but then it's harder to buy their commitment to the world because most of the movie for you has been about their commitments to each other. So which path do you choose? Here's the thing, there's no right answer. There's just the fact that it doesn't take much before the breadth of your story makes it difficult to effectively plot it in 2+ hours. The production crew of Marvel's Eternals chose option A, the flashbacks, and I felt its downside. You might not, but I did. This is not a failing of the film. Like I said, you lose something either way. It just means you should know to give Eternals time. It's going to take them half the film before they can say, okay, now that we've laid that foundation, now we can ask some interesting questions. Oh, and here's the slight spoiler. If you think that question is, do we kill the monsters? Fortunately, the Eternals is much more interesting than that. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Just like cows, sheep, and bison roam the earth in herds today, so too did plant-eating dinosaurs, and it appears they began flocking together much earlier than we used to think, just as the Jurassic period was beginning to unfold.
This is really a critical time in the evolution of dinosaurs. This is pretty early on. So the idea is that this type of social behavior may actually contribute to the evolutionary success of dinosaurs.
Jahan Ramazani of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology is a geochronologist. In his words,
I date things, and I date old things in the millions and billions of years, not the really young stuff.
In this case, Ramazani was dating tiny zircon crystals embedded in a fossil bed in Patagonia, near the southern tip of South America. Those crystals dated back to nearly 193 million years ago. And the fossils preserved there, an array of nearly 200 specimens of a plant-eater named Musaurus patagonicus, provide a snapshot of a dinosaur at all stages of its life: eggs and hatchlings, clumps of juveniles, and then, further out, adults.
So this kind of undisturbed distribution of fossils and this kind of age segregation basically shows that these dinosaurs had a kind of a social structure. They lived in a colony, and everybody has got things to do, duties with respect to the youngs and the juveniles.
The study in the journal Scientific Reports suggests dinosaurs developed complex social behavior 40 million years earlier than we used to think. And Ramazani says the work also advances long-standing questions about the social structure of dinosaurs.
Was it more like primitive taxa, like the crocodiles, or it looked like the more evolved types of animals like birds and mammals? And we are beginning to see that, yes, it looks more like a mammal or more like a bird type colony.
Whatever type of social structure it was, the scientists hypothesized that it helped large, plant-eating dinosaurs first spread across the planet, kickstarting tens of millions of years of dominion on Earth. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60 Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Sometimes, when watching Congress in action, I can't decide whether to laugh, cry, or check myself into an insane asylum. Not all lawmakers are political hacks, quacks, and corporate toadies, but that contingent seems to dominate. Most infuriating is that, while purporting to represent the people, Congress routinely does what the American majority does not want done and fails to do what people do want. Take a peek at the cuts Congress is making in Joe Biden's landmark infrastructure proposals. This is a monumental, long overdue undertaking to reinvest in America's physical house and social underpinnings, everything from roads and broadband networks to child care and paid family leave. The package would deliver real, tangible benefits across our nation, especially for low and middle-income families, so it is enormously popular. Yet, when the first half of the plan recently came to a vote in the House, Republicans turned it into a partisan mud wrestling show, loudly voting no on such obvious needs as fixing decrepit bridges, providing clean tap water in every community, and opening preschool education programs to all 3- and 4-year-olds. Cynical Republican gamesmanship aside, even more infuriating is the clique of self-described moderate Democrats who pose as champions of workaday Americans but constantly scuttle policies that would make their lives better. For example, the GOP and corporate Democrats have jointly demanded a $1 trillion compromise in Biden's national investment plans. What's being compromised? Not proposals to fund the corporate wish list, but long-postponed needs of everyday Americans. This is Jim Hightower saying, the wealthy and their political enablers complain that America can't afford such projects. But these aren't projects, they're people, and leaving them behind again would be an abominable moral failure of our society. Howdy-ho, folks. Thanks for tuning in and sharing my weekly commentaries. Also, please join me for a live web show I host every other Tuesday, the Hightower Lowdown Happy Hour at the Chat and Chew Cafe. You can join the action live online as I chat with grassroots leaders and progressive sparklies from around the country. Go to hightowerlowdown.org/chat-and-chew to find out about upcoming guests and watch past episodes. That's hightowerlowdown.org/chat-and-chew.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2006. That was the day mounted police charged 50 janitors and their supporters during a protest in Houston. SEIU's Justice for Janitors campaign had been organizing for years throughout the South and Southwest. Modeled on success achieved in California, SEIU broadened their campaign to Houston and Miami. The union called a month-long strike against the city's largest cleaning companies. Protests and civil disobedience actions continued throughout the strike. Hundreds of strikers routinely marched through the streets of Houston, beating drums and hauling bags of garbage into the middle of intersections to highlight the key services they provided to the city. They were subject to repeated threats of firings and arrests. When police charged at the janitors, it served to turn public support in favor of the strikers. By the end of the month, Tom Balinoff and SEIU Local 1 in Chicago claimed victory for 5,300 Houston janitors. The Chicago local had been central to the 3-year campaign in Houston. Incomes doubled and janitors finally had health insurance, paid vacations, and holidays. The Chicago Tribune detailed the campaign in a November 25th article. The union lobbied building owners and major corporations who held contracts with the cleaning companies. The union worked to gain a foothold among the janitors, sending in seasoned Latino janitors from Chicago to help with organizing. SEIU committed millions of dollars to the organizing drive, setting aside $1 million alone in strike funds. At a victory rally, union leader Flor Aguiar proclaimed, "No one thought a group of poor Latinos from Houston would be able to win anything. But today, we can lift our heads up very high." For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 41 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting only a high of 51, a mix of clouds and sun with winds light and variable. Looks like we might have a tiny bit of drying out here. Some clouds tonight with lows in the mid-30s, winds light and variable, and partly to mostly cloudy tomorrow with highs near 55, winds remaining light and variable. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County continue to increase. We now stand at 241,082 cases, and our deceased have increased as well, now standing at 341. Pollen is rated as none right outside the window in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is 36 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at level 1. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.4 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 94%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. London is 53 and cloudy. Paris is 47 and cloudy. Rome is 58 and mostly cloudy. Kyiv is 30 degrees and fair. Kabul is 42 and fair. Hong Kong is 68 degrees and clear. Tokyo is 55 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 60 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 55 and mostly cloudy. And New York is 44 degrees Fahrenheit and currently sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Lauren Cook of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg urged Russia to be more transparent about its military activities near Ukraine, but he stopped short of suggesting that Moscow might be preparing to invade its former Soviet neighbor. Ukraine claims that Russia kept tens of thousands of troops and equipment near their common border after conducting war games earlier this year. Russia annexed Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula in 2014 and has supported a separatist insurgency that broke out that year in eastern Ukraine and still controls territory there. The U.S. has warned the European Union to be wary of Russia's intentions, but EU diplomats said that while they have noticed Moscow's military buildup, they do not believe that Russia might launch action anytime soon. They have a pipeline to nail down there, business-wise. We call on Russia to be transparent about its military activity, Stoltenberg told reporters after talks in Brussels with Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba. It is important to prevent escalations and reduce tensions. Ukraine's defense ministry claims that about 90,000 Russian troops are stationed not far from their border and in rebel-controlled areas in Ukraine's east. It said units of the Russian 41st Army have remained in Yelna, a town about 160 miles north of the Ukrainian border.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Vanessa Guerra of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. 3 people have been arrested in Poland in connection with an anti-Semitic demonstration last week where far-right participants shouted death to the Jews, the country's interior minister said yesterday, Monday. The demonstration took place last Thursday on Poland's Independence Day in the central Polish city of Kalisz. Participants also burned a copy of a medieval document that offered Jews protection and rights in Polish lands. Polish Jewish community said in a statement that Polish Jews have not experienced such contempt and hatred expressed in public for years. Interior Minister Kamiński announced the arrest on Twitter, saying there is no consent to anti-Semitism and hatred based on nationality, religion, or ethnicity. Polish authorities have faced questions as to why it took so long to make the arrests, given that the incident was widely reported in Poland. One of those arrested was Wojciech Olszanski, a far-right activist also known as Alexander Jablonowski, who said on burning the copy of the Statute of Kalisz, the 13th century document laying out Jewish rights. We are abolishing Jewish rights in this land, and death to the enemies of Poland. And then the crowd responded with chants of death, death, death. Punch the Nazis. Poland is showing the way. And that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.